We welcome all of you back to Fox 32. Rick, I want to start with you. In the news of the day, this apparent Iranian missile attack on Israel. How do you believe this will play into the debate tonight?
Well, I think it definitely will play into the debate. You've already seen former President Trump come out, does as he does whenever there's some international incident that, well, if I was there, this never would have happened, which of course ignores the fact that in 2020, I believe, there was a Iranian missile strike on a U.S. airbase.
This was in retaliation for the Soleimani killing?
Right. So, I mean, there's going to be a lot of blame game here on the Republican side from J.D. Vance. Walz is going to be trying to be, I think, the voice of calming reason and the fact that yes, this did happen. Things are escalating in the Middle East. And he does have to play some defense here because, of course, with all of the issues involving U.S. military aid to Israel, Israel's encroachment into Lebanon, the things that have had all of those tens of thousands of people killed in Gaza, it's going to be kind of a needle threading here for, I think, for Tim Walz to explain what the administration is doing now is not his responsibility, but it is Harris's part.
I mean, certainly there's an electoral impact here. You've got a state like Michigan, a swing state with the largest Muslim population, I believe, in the United States, and you've got the Jewish vote as well, who want to hear a tough talk in defense of Israel. Aviva Bowen, say you're coaching Governor Walz tonight. What do you tell him to do? What's his strategy?
Yeah, I think Tim Walz needs to reinforce the message of expanding opportunity for middle-class families and protecting our freedoms, and he's going to do that by speaking directly to millions of Americans. Contrast that with J.D. Vance, who has an audience of one, Donald Trump. Vance has shape-shifted and changed his persona to please this man. And we saw him
from calling him America's Hitler to being his number one
He called his
supporter.
economic policies a failure. He called him cultural heroin. He called him America's Hitler. Maybe Trump saw that as a compliment, but tonight it's going to be a phony versus a football coach.
Ray Lopez, if you're coaching J.D. Vance, how do you respond to some of those attacks that you flip-flopped on how you feel about the front-runner on your ticket?
Well, I think he has the opportunity to say, look, I've been able to change my position. I've educated myself and I've made a change. Maybe it'd be good for Kamala Harris to explain her flip-flops on a number of her issues. He has the chance to put Tim Walz on defensive. But I think the real hard part is going to be to see who, despite all the troubles in the world right now, and there are many that we saw tonight in the Middle East, who can focus on those consensus issues that are of key importance to the people who look very much like Chicagoans, those blue-collar folks, not just in the Midwest, but across the entire nation, who are looking for someone who's going to address inflation, crime, the border, while knowing that these two individuals are the spokesperson for two campaigns which quite honestly have become caricatures of themselves. And the goal has to be now not to embarrass the boss or say something that's different from what he or she may actually espouse on the campaign trail.
And presumably that's why these two are on their respective tickets, because they have that perceived blue-collar impact. I want to play a soundbite from Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, who's going to be in the spin room tonight. He had this to say about what he expects out of J.D. Vance.
J.D. Vance continually lies, and so throughout this debate tonight, I expect that will happen. I have had that circumstance on a debate stage where the person opposite me continually said things that weren't true, and you have to decide in the very short period of time that you have to answer and respond whether you're going to refute what they just said and try to tell the truth about what they talked about, or talk about what you think is important for people to hear.
And Rick Pearson, this brings up the notion that CBS is not going to be fact-checking with their moderators. I think they're going to have a QR code where you can scan it and go to some kind of real-time fact-checking. How do you think that's going to impact things for viewers tonight?
Well, of course, who complained about the fact-checking in the presidential debate 3 weeks ago? It was Donald Trump, okay? Let me just tell you from a mailing that went out to supporters today from J.D. Vance, Rick, I don't care if it's 3-on-1 against him and the biased moderators at CBS. He's already declaring a loss right now by saying this. I mean, you're basically finding an excuse for defeat before, this was hours before the debate. So, I mean, I think there will be some fact checking because they seem to be easing off on that a little bit later today.
I mean, say that they go back into the eating dogs and cats stuff in Springfield, Ohio. You fact check that maybe?
Well, certainly.
As
I mean,
the ABC moderators did?
but I don't think it will be an intensive fact checking that'll be going on. I think each of them are going to want to talk a lot.
Aviva, again, so if you're Tim Walz and you notice things that J.D. Vance said that don't comport with reality, do you spend time correcting it or do you try to hit the talking points that you've prepared?
Well, I think you have to discredit him and just call it what it is, which is phonyism. J.D. Vance, a couple weeks ago on one of the Sunday shows, said that sometimes you have to create stories to stir things up. He said the quiet part out loud, right? Like he said that we're going to deter attention, we're going to distract people, we're going to make things up. And he doubled down on that cats and dogs thing even after the Republican governor of Ohio said, this isn't true and you are putting people in danger.
And
People
the
are
mayor
being
of Springfield.
threatened. Everyone has said this isn't true. And even recently, J.D. Vance doubled down on it and said, well, we'll have to go there and see for ourselves.
Ray Lopez, if you're J.D. Vance and Tim Walz makes claims about you that are not exactly true, how do you respond?
I think J.D. Vance has to steer away from doing what we saw with Trump and Biden in the first debate, getting into a childish tit-for-tat on live television. I think he has to focus on his points, and that's going to be a very difficult thing for him to do because it's very easy for the Republican candidates, both president and vice president, to go towards these talking points that are outrageous, that are outlandish, that are red meat for their base. And I think to be perfectly honest, nobody's really going to be changing their vote based on tonight's performance. This is all just to see who's going to rile up their base the best and see how they can embarrass the other one to make the other one tomorrow's meme. And I'm not sure that either one of them is ready to see that happen with what we're going to put out today in terms of policy. America wants policy answers because they're not getting it from the vice president. They're not getting it from the former president. They're hoping for some answers from these two tonight. But I think, the goal has to be not to embarrass yourself, not to fall for any of the traps about everything that everyone says about the other, the finger pointing, the lies back and forth. But I don't think it's going to be a service to America who are hoping for answers tonight.
Well, that same Vance email that I referred to, he refers to his opponent as cowardly, creepy Tim Walz. So is that an indication of where this is going to go tonight?
And it's how many times are they going to call each other weird, creepy? How many jokes about all the other things that we've talked about throughout the weeks? How much of that is going to come up tonight as a diversion from actually talking about the real things that are going on? Like, what's the plan to deal with the asylum seekers that are going to be in our neighborhoods for 7 years? What's the plan to address DACA? What's the plan to invest in African-American communities throughout the country, and especially in swing states that have now seen an influx of migrants from the border? Where are those plans going to come? And I don't think anyone wants to have those serious conversations, but they're going to talk about, what Tim Walz put in bathrooms and
I think
things of that nature.
To your point, I think people do want a serious conversation, but some of the things that Trump and Vance are putting out there are weird, are dark. Vance and Trump will not agree to come forward with their position on a national ban on abortion. They've been asked several times, and they waver, and they don't give a good answer. So I'm hoping to hear that tonight. I want to hear where J.D. Vance stands on a woman's right to reproductive freedom.
I think all of America's owed answers to these questions and many more. But what we see is both parties are veering further and further to the extremes, ignoring the middle of America, that 80% that is normal, just wanting some sanity back in government, whether it's at the federal level or any level underneath. And I don't think we're going to get that tonight from these two.
All right, well, let's take a look at some of the ground rules for tonight's debate. We mentioned that there's going to be no fact-checking from the moderators. Each candidate's going to get 2 minutes to answer their question, and then I believe the mics are going to be on the entire time. They're not going to cut the mics as they did in the presidential debate. So, Rick Pearson, do you think a vice presidential debate moves the needle at all? Let's talk about the fact that this is a very close election right now.
It is a very close election, and yes, you can argue about any switch of a point can make a difference. I mean, CNN was touting the fact that their polling has got has Harris ahead in Omaha, that one congressional district that the Republicans were looking at trying to take away and make it statewide.
Right. So
yes,
you mentioned that Nebraska is split. They split their electoral votes there.
Yes. So I mean, yes, everything is important, but as the alderman said, and it's the fundamental rule: don't embarrass your presidential candidate, because that I think is what each of those candidates, that's their most important job tonight. It's not necessarily to portray policies and promises. It's not to embarrass themselves so that they embarrass their presidential
Well, I think
candidate.
their individual character also speaks to their boss's judgment, right? And I think that's in particularly important when you think of the GOP nominee, who's, 80 years old? So I don't think this is an inconsequential debate when you look at it through that lens.
And I think we've also seen how important a vice president can be, even in our own administration right now, when we've seen the decline of our own president and the stepping up of the current vice president, as well as members of the cabinet, to help keep government moving forward. You want to make sure that that vice president, while mainly ceremonial, inconsequential in the election, has value in government, whomever is in charge, because should something happen, to your point, you want to make sure that that vice president can step in, can lead, and is aware and in command of the facts and situations, and shares the same policy vision that was put forth in the campaign, so that you're getting the 2-for-1 that you voted for.
All right, we're just getting started here. We have so much more to go. We are going to be right back after this with more of our Paris on Politics pre-debate special. Stick around.